At the last round of Hot Pit Autofest, we had two major issues with my LS Swap 350Z. One problem was an issue with the fuel delivery system, which I'm fixing by spending way too much money on a new fuel cell and basically redoing everything. But that'll be in another video. The other problem we had was with this transmission. Now really, I shouldn't have any problems with the transmission. If you're not familiar or haven't been following along, this is a new Tremec TKX. At least it was new. It's got 4, maybe 5 events on it now. In between that and the engine is a new action clutch, rated for way more horsepower than this thing puts down, way more torque. So really there shouldn't be an issue with the transmission. There shouldn't be an issue with the clutch. So there has to be an issue with something in the way that they're put together, because that's really the only thing that I did. Now I have 3 ideas as to what could be causing the transmission to not go into gear correctly. Now when I say we had transmission issues, what was happening is the car would fight me going into gear. It would go first, second was a little crunchy, third, it felt like hitting a wall. Sometimes it would go in, sometimes it wouldn't, but pretty much every time it was a fight. Now there's 3 possible solutions to this. There could be more, I may find other issues along the way, but the way my brain is thinking is starting with the easiest thing, which we actually did at the track. This little rusty plate here is actually a heat shield that we had the fab school, who's at every round of Hot Pit, make for me in between practice and battles. Our thought was the clutch fluid, which hides back here, was getting too hot, becoming ineffective, and then not engaging the clutch fully, which would stop me from shifting. So we had them make up this quick heat shield. I'll put some like heat tape on it and try to make it a little bit more legit. We threw 1 rivet in there because we were down to the last minute before I had to be on the line. But thinking that through made me realize that I only have .3 brake fluid or clutch fluid in here, which the boiling point of that is way too low. So that could definitely be an issue. So while we're going through the other 2 possible problems, I'm just going to drain all this and put in .5, which has a way higher boiling point. So if this was an issue or part of the issue, at least that'll be resolved. Now the other 2 potential causes to this issue are going to require this transmission to come out, which is unfortunate, but with the design of this transmission, it's only 4 bolts, plus the mount, the drive shaft, and all the fluid. But once we get this off, we'll have a better look at the slave cylinder. I need to check if the air gap on that is correct, because if it's wrong, it'll either be engaging the clutch too much or not engaging it enough. If it's not engaging enough, that would definitely be a cause to the shifting problem that we're having. The other thing it could be, this is an aftermarket SFI bell housing, and these need to be centered on the engine properly before you put the transmission in. Now, I did take measurements, but I wasn't 100% sure on the way I was doing it. It's kind of complex. I didn't exactly have all the tools I needed. So there's a chance that it's not perfectly centered, which could throw something off. I'm not exactly sure if that would cause this issue, but it's something to at least look into when it's all apart. So let's quit talking and get this trans out. To all of my other garage floor mechanics, we know how this is not fun at all. Someday I'll have a lift, but for now, we do it the sketchy way. Oh, that might be it. Not what I was going for, but that's one way to get it out.
This was an odd finding too. My trans mount has kind of deformed. I doubt this is the problem, but it's for sure contributing to it.
Well, the transmission mount looking like that is definitely odd and a little bit of a cause for concern. I'm wondering if there's too much heat in that area that caused that mount to deform, because it shouldn't do that. I mean, it's like a name brand energy suspension poly bushing made for the trans and whatever. Never seen that happen. It is what it is. Throw that away. I guess we'll go to a solid mount. That also got me thinking, if it's that hot down there, how is the transmission fluid holding up? Tremec recommends you just use normal ATF, but the boiling point on normal ATF is pretty low when you compare it to like higher performance manual transmission fluid. So since we had to drain it, I'll just put better fluid in there. Maybe the fluid was getting super hot and it just wasn't allowing the gears to work properly. I don't know. Regardless, those are 2 easy things to upgrade. It's only going to cost about $40 for a solid mount and, another 30, 40 bucks for trans fluid. So might as well fix those while we're down there. But with the trans off, we can get a better look at the other two things that I've been kind of speculating are causes for this. So for that, let's get under the car. Okay, so trans is off. We're looking in the bell housing now. If we zoom all the way in, it's kind of hard to see, but I'm thinking where that pilot bushing is supposed to live, it looks just a little worn out. And the reason that would be is because the bell housing is not centered on the engine, which would mean the transmission's not perfectly centered going into that pilot bushing area, which is basically the back of the crankshaft, which isn't great because that means I have to pull all of this apart. I don't really want to do that, but I guess it's the only way I'll be sure that it all works. All right, we're back under the car. Now we've got the bell housing, clutch, and flywheel off, and we can take a better look where this pilot bushing is, or bearing. And you can see it is definitely ovalized. It's not a perfect circle anymore. So that kind of confirms my suspicion. Couple of things going on here. Obviously, that is not good. That confirms my suspicion that the bell housing was not properly centered. It's my fault. So with the bell housing not centered, it means the input shaft is not going into the pilot bearing perfectly, which is why it is all worn out like that. So we'll have to pull that out, put a new one in, and then we'll index the bell housing correctly. I've been doing a lot of research on it. I've got a friend who's gonna FaceTime me through the whole thing and kind of walk me through how to do it, because I was really confused the first time I did it, and I thought I got it right, but I'm really not confident in how I did it, and now it's confirmed that I did not do it right. So lesson learned there. Thankfully, it's not an expensive mistake. It's just a lot of labor to get all this stuff out, but that's all right. Also, when I took the clutch and flywheel off, the pressure plate, only 2 of the bolts were tight. The rest had slowly worked themselves out. They weren't loose, they weren't gonna fall out, but they definitely weren't tight, even though I put Loctite on them. So that could be contributing to the problem, maybe not, I don't know. One more thing we'll fix. I don't know if I mentioned the trans fluid as well. We're gonna replace that. And then you guys saw that trans mount, that's definitely not good, so we're gonna replace that. So there's a lot of things kind of adding up to what could have been the issue with the whole shifting thing, or rather not shifting. Maybe it wasn't one specific thing, maybe it was just all of this added together. I don't know. Regardless, a lot of stuff to fix, but I'm thankful that it's not an issue with the transmission. 1,000 days later, whatever the little SpongeBob cutscene is, that's what it feels like. But I finally got that destroyed pilot bearing out, and I think I have a theory of what happened and why it was such a mission to get out. But first, let me show you how it came out, because it was not fun. So this is what's left of it. This is the actual case. This is the part that holds the bearing itself, and then this is the little basket for the bearing. Now, my theory is the case for the bearing somehow went beyond this, pushed out of it, and then the bearing was sitting behind this, because that's how it was in the car. I could not get this out because this was behind it and backed up against the crank, and it was just all demolished. This thing came out with ease. It was just basically blown apart. But this would not come out, which is why it's so destroyed. I had to get in there with a chisel, a hammer, a screwdriver, a Dremel. I ended up cutting it and then just chipping away until it finally came out in a few different pieces. You can see I had to hammer this one to get it to bend into a bit smaller of a shape so that it would come out. Because, of course, after this failed, as everything was just kind of rattling around in there with too much clearance, it, I wouldn't say it welded itself to the crank, but it definitely became way too tight to where normal tools wouldn't pull this out. As far as the cause for all this, I really do believe it's because my bell housing was not perfectly centered on the engine when we put the trans to it, which caused the input shaft of the transmission to not be perfectly center in the pilot bearing. And that caused the pilot bearing to fail prematurely, which then led to it kind of getting stuck and ultimately led to the transmission not shifting properly because nothing was really in line. So I got all the tools so I can actually measure the bell housing and do it correctly and index it. I got offset dowels so that we can dial in the positioning of it. Now, I've never done that. When I first put the bell housing and transmission and everything in,
I did my best, but I was borrowing some tools. I watched a YouTube video and I just wasn't super confident in how I did it, how I measured it, but the numbers were good enough. So I was like, whatever, throw it in, let's go. And obviously it wasn't terribly far off, but I think it was far enough off to cause this failure here. So it's time to watch a bunch more YouTube videos and really figure out exactly how to get this bell housing indexed properly so that I know we're not gonna have any issues down the road. Okay, so how do we actually index the bell housing? Like I said, this is a process that I didn't really understand and didn't really have the time to figure out when we initially put all this together because we were under a crazy time crunch. Now we have a little time, now it's a problem, so we gotta figure it out. Thankfully, Holley has an amazing amount of information, not only on their website, but also on YouTube. So I'm gonna put a link down in the comments of their write-up on how to do this, and then they also have a video on how to do this, because that's what I'm gonna be following. I'll still show you guys how to do it, but they go way more in depth on all the technical things that I'll probably skip over because I don't wanna talk on a topic that I barely even know about. But let's try to figure this out. So for tools, really all you need is a magnetic base dial indicator. This is what we're gonna use to measure the run out of the bell housing. And then I bought offset dowel pins. So these are dowels that go in the engine and they're offset just a little bit to move the bell housing if we need to. Now, ideally, you'd measure the bell housing, see where it's at, figure out the run out and what offset you'd need, and then you'd order your offset dowels. Kind of being on a time crunch, I just ordered 2 different offset dowels and hopefully I got one that's gonna work because they do come in different sizes. So one of them is 7 thousandths offset and the other one's 14 thousandths offset. And I think there's one more size that's 24 thousandths. Hopefully we don't need that because I didn't buy it. But let's start measuring and see where we're at. Before we can start measuring, of course, we have to get the bell housing and everything bolted back up. But it's important that we remove our spark plugs because we're going to be turning the motor over by hand a lot. And by pulling the plugs out, it's just going to make this motor way easier to spin. Nothing ever goes as easy as it should. So I got the flywheel on, the new pilot bearing installed. The next step is to put the bell housing on so we can actually start taking measurements, which means I have to remove the slave cylinder because it's actually mounted to the bell housing and it would get in our way of that dial indicator gauge thingy. What should be a quick, easy 4 bolts, you can see 2 came out. This one broke this AutoZone 4mm Allen key, and this one broke this Harbor Freight 4mm Allen key. So now I have 2 bolts with broken off tools in them. Nice. Now that I've spent way too long getting the slave off of the bell housing, I got the bell housing back on the car. We can break out our new little dial gauge thing, get it mounted up, start taking some measurements.
6.5 hours later.
This has been a fairly annoying and very time-consuming job. I've just ran into a lot of little things like stripped bolts, and the factory dowel pin fought me for almost an hour just to get it out, but whatever. It's done. We have the offset dowel pins in, and I thought I would at least talk you through kind of how I got there. I didn't record any of it because it was genuinely frustrating, and the Holley video does a way better job of explaining how to do this, but I'll give you my 2 cents. Now, one of the longest parts for me was getting this dial indicator set up on the actual engine underneath the car so that it was in the right orientation and free, because the engine's going to rotate and spin this whole assembly. This stays still, and then you need to be able to read this. That took a while because there just isn't a lot of space to work with, but we figured it out. Once you do that, you find a low point and you mark that as 0. So low point meaning this is the furthest away from the center line of the engine. So that's your 0. And then you rotate, and basically you split this up into quarters, right? So I split it this way, and I just put marks here after you find your 0. Like I said, the Holley video explains this. But rotate it 90 degrees, pretend that worked, mark your measurement. You can kind of ignore these numbers because I was reading the dial gauge wrong. Besides, I don't even know what I wrote there. But you mark your measurement, whatever it says on here, at 90 degrees. Rotate it a full 180, mark your measurement, rotate it another 90 degrees, mark your measurement, and then come back to 0. And that's going to tell you the total offset that you are away from center. what we learned was that the bell housing needs to come straight down, because these numbers were fairly close to each other, which means the bell housing was pretty good side to side. It was up and down, that it was pretty far off. Sorry about the numbers not making sense. It took me a while just to figure out what I was even looking at and what made sense. But the way it boiled down was the bell housing was 30 thousandths too high total. You take that number, you divide it in half, which would be 15 thousandths, and that's the total amount you need to move, because we're talking about a circle. If I move the whole circle down too much, it would... Watch the Holly video, he explains it better than I do. But basically you take your total number, divide it in half, which would be 15 thousandths. That's what we needed to move. I had 14 thousandths offset dowel pins, which worked out perfect because we needed to be within 5 thousandths. So if I needed 15, I moved it 14. That leaves me 1 thousandths room of error, which is well within the 5 thousandths tolerance that we needed. Now the annoying part about all this is the engine is with the flywheel on. You don't have the clutch on. I have the bell housing bolted up. It needs to be bolted tight the same way it's going to be with the transmission. Take your measurement. Realize what you have to do. In my case, install those 14 thousandths offset dowels. And then you pull the bell housing off, put the dowels in, put the bell housing back on, do all those measurements again, look at your numbers, make sure they're correct, which thankfully they were. Then take the bell housing back off, put your clutch on, torque everything down to spec, and then put the bell housing back on, and then everything can go back to normal. So that's the state we're in now. Everything's going back together. This took way longer than it should have. Now, it's not that this is a super hard job. I don't want to discourage you from trying to do this. If you want to put, let's say, like a dog box in your car, you would have to do this because you're going to need an aftermarket bell housing. It's just really time consuming. You really have to pay attention to all the little numbers and make sure your measurements are right. And it's 10 times more difficult and just straight up annoying when you're doing it on the ground, because I keep having to crawl out from under the car to grab some tool I missed or to write something down, or it was a headache, but it's done. And this really does explain all the issues I was having, right? The bell housing was offset, which caused the pilot bearing to completely fail, which caused the transmission input shaft to not be where it's supposed to be, which is causing the transmission to miss shift. You combine that with all the other smaller issues that I had, like the trans fluid probably boiling, the clutch fluid probably boiling, a few other little odds and ends, and it cascaded into a little $12 part failing, which ultimately led to me having a terrible time at hot pit. I mean, a lot of it just boiled down to the trans not working, and it was all thanks to this. And as frustrating as all of that is, I have to say I am thankful that there is a solution to it, that there is a problem behind all of these little issues, right? It's not just something that, well, I'm not sure, maybe this will fix it, maybe it won't. It's like, nope, that's for sure the problem, and I'm 99% sure that this is gonna fix it. Transmission's back in, everything's all bolted up the way it should be. I've just gotta throw fluid in it, put the drive shaft exhaust back on, and we should be good. Unfortunately, I'm not able to put all that in and actually go test it because we're also redoing the fuel system and everything while the car is all taken apart. So that'll be in the next video. Like I said in the last clip, I'm thankful to have found a cause for the issues we were having. The job was really annoying, I gotta say. Removing and then installing a transmission by yourself on the floor has to be like top 5 least favorite things to do on a car, but the job's done. So fingers crossed we'll have no more trans or shifter issues in the next round of hot pit. We should have no more fuel issues with what's to come next. So if you want to see that, make sure you're subscribed. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Thank you as always for watching, and of course, catch you in the next one.